So I guess we are as what we're going to be here. And our task is to finish or hopefully make a stab at the rest of Mel's green meeting.
Hmm.
Is there anything we should be talking about before we do that?
Well,
Mm,
just that that book was interesting.
right.
I thought that was interesting. The student said, "Have you seen this novel?" I said, "No." I said, "I don't know anything about it." She said, "Well, you probably ought to read the beginning of that."
And did you know of the author or anything?
Nothing.
Wow.
She really devoted like the first 5 pages of her
Yeah,
novels.
it's big
You and
a big
Melanie.
investment into it.
Yeah.
And I thought she had it right. I thought that
Yeah.
she said what I liked about it. She said was that Hurlburt was just trying to get at Melanie the way Melanie was without trying to make any theories about it.
Hmm.
And I think that was true. And so I was happy that that came through to her.
Mhm.
And it's an interesting way to use the work. I thought that
Mm.
it made the point that she was trying to make. So
Mm.
I thought it was pretty cool.
Very cool. Yeah. Thank you for sharing.
And I thought it was the kind of thing that Mel has been saying. How could it be that people are different from each other when I didn't really know that? And
Yeah.
she's not the only one who thinks that.
Mm.
So I thought that was interesting.
Did you read any more of the book or just?
I didn't.
He tapped out when it wasn't about him anymore.
I'm
Yeah, that's right. That's
curious if it pops back up.
does
Melanie's.
it does Melanie pop back up?
I don't know. I don't know.
I've thought about getting the book and seeing whether that was a one shot deal, but
Maybe I'll
But
read
it's
it to
just so
you instead.
curious that, yeah, there was like a significant portion dedicated to you as a real life human too. Like it wasn't like an abstract version of your work, you know? Like it
right.
was you, but you've not worked, it's like if you read that, you would think, oh, she obviously like has had direct comms with Russ at some point because it felt so pretty knowledgeable on it, like it was a great reflection of your work.
I don't have a very good memory, so it's possible, but I don't I don't have any recollection of it.
Interesting. Anyway,
And
yes,
and she got the date of the book, so it's like she must not have the book because she called it 2009, and the book is really 2007. So she must not have had the book right there. It's
Not
I mean, the sentiment is great.
one of life's mysteries.
Very cool.
So am I going to share my screen here?
Yes.
Yes, please.
So you should be seeing my screen now. Is that right?
Yep.
All right. And we were done through day 9, so we're starting with 8.
Mhm. It's like straight up sensory awareness to me.
Seems that way to me.
Heavy pressure. I don't know if we're keeping track of the pressures and the floatings.
I don't think we've gotten other than past this bodily.
Mm.
Mhm.
We can put in pressure if we want, but I don't know that we've got them.
I forget which ones we put a couple categories, but I'm not sure
Did
which.
we?
Pressure and then I think a lightness, floatiness.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we were talking about weight. There's been heaviness
Okay.
and lightness.
On to number 2, which might be a problem. Is this the right color of green? That's the color I've been using.
green and you were doing purple, green and purple.
Yeah, I'm a little reluctant to change all the greens to purples because there might be some reference to something green in here, but
Oh, right, it's purple and green. So yeah. So this is
so
another
this is
absorbed one,
or carried along by.
carried along.
This is the kind of thing that I would call carried along by. But I don't remember whether we did anything more about that. We had many long conversations about it.
Many.
But
Yeah, it was this debate about you weren't singling out any one thing from the movie. So the thing where I originally called it content free, and then we decided that wasn't true, and then set
right,
it on non-particularizing or something like that.
so are we happy with carried along by?
Well, my question there is what's the difference between that and when we've said absorbed by for previous things? Are you seeing a distinction?
To me, it seems the same.
The distinction for me is that in my recollection is that you have been absorbed by at a deeper level than this movie. When you were when you were talking when you were listening to your grandfather's tape or whatever, you seemed more engrossed there. Whereas here, you're watching a movie, you're carried along by the plot of the movie. There's nothing else going on, and there's nothing else particular. But it's not like you're on the edge of your seat, carried along by, which it seemed like you were more in absorbed by.
Interesting.
So that's the distinction I would make. I don't know. And the other thing is that in my sampling experience, there's a lot of samples where people are watching a movie and they're just carried along by the movie. Like just their samples read exactly like this. I'm watching the movie. I'm doing whatever it is. I'm taking in probably whatever the director wanted me to take in. I don't really know what the director wanted me to take in, but the plot's going on. I'm carried along with the plot. I'm listening to what the characters are saying. I'm understanding all that stuff, but nothing in particular. That's very common when people are watching a movie. And I call that carried along by a movie. But I don't generally say carried along by the conversation, although maybe I should and maybe I do actually.
Yeah, to me, I get what you mean about the grandfather being like deeper absorbed. But I don't know about some other things we've called absorbed, or conversations or movies or whatever. Like it seems like splitting hairs at a certain point, whether it's absorbed or carried along.
Yeah. Yeah, because I understand the distinction you're making, Russ, and sort of agree with it. But agree, Julian, I'd like to look at all the ones that we've called absorbed and then see, like, hang on, are there enough differences between them that we would be able to call some carried along by and some call absorbed when they're more engrossed? Engrossed is a great word, Russ. That's really relevant here. Because I think, yep, I see a slight difference there, but is it enough of a difference or is it splitting hairs? I'm hearing what you're both saying.
So my guess is that there is probably a continuum out there. Whether it's worth to try to make it is another story. It's for sure not. I'm paying attention to some particular aspect. It's not that. I'm not paying attention to the dress that the girl is wearing or the sound that the voice is making or whatever. It's none of that, and it's not having my own visual image of something, and it's not having sensory awareness of. It's none of that. Whether there is a distinction to be made between carried along by and absorbed, probably there is. Whether it's worth making it, I don't know.
But then also back to what you were saying about whether you do describe conversation as carried along by. Because I'm now more swayed to that of like, I think, if I recall correctly, that there are certain examples of me where we've said absorbed in conversation that now with this sort of perspective might actually feel more carried along by conversation.
I think I agree with that exactly, totally.
Because, yeah, I think the absorbed bit suggests like a more engrossed sort of thing. And I think that there's been examples of just purely, yeah, I'm in the conversation, I'm here, I'm, all of that. But whether it's that step back, just carried along by. Interesting.
My impression of some of the conversations is that you're more engrossed than you were in this particular part of the movie, but I'm not 100% sure about that. I'm happy to leave it as question marks
Yep.
and see whether we can figure it out. When the green meeting doesn't necessarily have to solve problems as we go.
Yep.
It's collecting data that we can come back to later.
Discussion. Same thing.
Would seem like.
I have a question, Russ. Is it common, or have you seen it before? People who are like carried along by a movie, and like if you ask them like if there was a particular scene, they don't even remember or say it wasn't even so important to the experience.
I would say what's more common is they say they were carried along by the movie. And if I ask them, they can tell me what the scene is. I was watching Ben-Hur and the chariots were going around the track or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And but I recall, I think it can go either way. I think, and I've never been able to figure out whether there was a distinction to be made there. When people say I can't remember, was that just because they were trying to tell me sort of right off the bat? I was just, I was doing what the director wanted me to do. I was taking in the content of the movie, whatever that was. What it was didn't particularly matter in the sense that I wasn't adding anything particular of my own to it. So I don't even remember what it was. But I don't know whether that's any different from just carried along by the movie or absorbed in the movie or whatever.
Yeah.
Did that answer your question?
It did. I mean, to me, I was still surprised by your experience, Mel, because even the questions I tried to ask, which weren't really good questions, but like if we knew what scene this was, what scene you were watching, would we understand something more about your experience? And you generally said no to those questions. But like to me, in my head, I was like, well, a scene of a kiss is different from a scene of a car chase. Like it's different absorbed experience. But I guess to you, I don't know, maybe the way I phrased the question wasn't helpful, or maybe
No, I understand the question, and I understand what you're saying, and the only way I think it could fit into that category is if it was at a if a beat went off during a scene where I was particularly engrossed, which would then fall into that like other level of absorbed that we're saying, like, is this splitting hairs? So if there was a climatic scene right near the end and someone just got murdered, then probably if you asked me those same questions, I would have said, well, yes, because it was at this pivotal moment that I was really, whereas I suspect that these samples went off at times where the movie was just going along and I was just watching it.
Well, maybe let's keep going, because I think there is an
Is there an
especially engrossed sample.
Okay, great.
But that one you couldn't even. Well, yeah, let's see that one when we come to it.
So I would say that your question was from my point of view a natural attitude question, and I think there's absolutely no question about it that Mel's neuron state is different when she's watching a kiss scene than when she's watching a car chase scene. I don't think there's any question about that. Somewhere there are neurons that are different in that. But that doesn't mean that it's in her direct experience of it.
Hmm.
Any more than the Buddhists like to use a clear lake. A clear lake could be reflecting a kiss scene and could be reflecting a car chase scene. And it doesn't matter to the lake. The, the scene being reflected is totally different. But and it probably does actually slightly matter to the lake in
Hmm.
that there's more red electrons or whatever they are, photons, red photons coming in this scene and more black photons coming in that scene or whatever. So the lake is being disturbed in a slightly different way, but not much.
Yeah, that's to me that's what kind of blew my mind. Yeah, it took me a long time to try to understand.
Mm.
Those, I think those are the natural attitude is very stubborn.
Mm.
Mm.
So number 4 is the same.
Mhm.
Yep.
And it is sort of the example, sort of the answer to Julian's question. These are no doubt different scenes, and Mel's no doubt experiencing them in different ways,
Mhm.
but what to say about that is another deal. Words present,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
which in my lingo means not spoken, not heard, not seen, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And feelings,
Yeah.
bodily,
Melanie. I think Melanie saying "nice long time" was all at once and unfolding.
was it?
I think
I
so.
don't remember. Could very well be. I don't remember. The the interesting thing about this feelings was that it may have been feelings of frustration and may have been feelings coming from the movie.
Mhm.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the experience of feelings was heightened as a result of both of those things happening concurrently.
Right. Onward.
Mm-hmm.
Onward. This is the very absorbed one I meant. But here I think
Interesting.
you didn't
It's
even
almost,
want to talk about the speed because you were just like I forgot, like I was so pulled out I couldn't even remember.
yeah, it's like it's done the complete opposite to what you want it to do.
Yeah.
So I don't understand that. What's the opposite of what?
So, because Julian was saying earlier, like he finds it challenging when I can't even recall or like provide details about the scene when I'm saying that I'm carried along by the movie, because he's like, well, hang on, that's hard for him to understand if you're so carried along by it, but then can't even necessarily recall particulars about the scene. And then we were discussing just before that maybe when I'm like even more engrossed in parts of the movie as opposed to just being carried along by, perhaps then the particulars of the scene become more important or more potent. But here it's like the reverse to what Julian wants to happen has happened, where I'm like, no, I'm telling you, I was even more absorbed in this section of the film, but can I tell you what it was? No, I can't because I was so engrossed that now the beeps rattled me and now like I couldn't even tell you really what was happening.
So I think that's an important observation because I think what happens is that when people do whatever it is that they do, including watching a movie, so Mel here watching a movie, she is in absolutely, there's no question in anybody's mind that there is something about her neurons that are reacting to the movie. That's absolutely the case. Whether that, whether there's some experience of that, I think in order to have experience, you sort of have to have a, you have to be not totally engrossed. You have to you have to have some observation of the external world, the internal world, some state in order to recognize. I don't want to be too committed to that, but this is a good example of I have turned off the rest of the world with maybe greater than normal. So what I'm trying to say is that I think that people are multiprocessors all the time, and multi in a variety, large number of different ways probably. But Mel is so engrossed here that she has turned down her multiprocessing so that all there is the movie is affecting her.
Yeah. And I think that's a really, that sits really well with me. I think that that's a very common thing for me. I often use the term, which is very young and perhaps Australian, locked in. Like I get, when I'm engrossed, absorbed, or like just a lot of the experiences in my life, I'm quite locked in. So there's blinkers on, it's like, rather than people that notice a lot of things, I've somehow got the ability to keep myself in a little bubble where the other things I'm not letting in at all. And I think that this is a really great example of that, this sample.
Does that satisfy everybody?
Yep.
All right.
Another way I've sometimes described it, I don't know how this sits with you, Russ, but is like a hyper focused. You know, like it's like same with locked in. I'm hyper focused on the thing that I'm focused on.
I don't think I know enough to be confident about what I'm about to say, but I think it's quite possible to be hyper focused, and it's also quite possible to be not multiprocessing. So it's not like so in general I got A and B and C and D and E and F and G and all going on at some time, and I think it's possible to focus in particularly on A. But I think it's also possible to just turn down or off B, C, D, E, and F. And I'm not sure that those are necessarily the same thing.
Yep.
They might be the same thing, but they might be neurologically or experientially or something very different for each other. But I don't think I know for sure.
Have you ever done, sorry, this is a slight sidebar, but have you ever done any, this is well beyond my knowledge, but like MRIs or brain scans of any people that you've worked with?
I have done one fMRI study, and it was a very small study. It was it was an interesting study.
Did
I
you
think
learn
I
more?
think sorry.
Did you learn more with the aiding of, the scans? Like, did it help you understand anything further or differently?
I guess the answer to that is no.
Why?
And the reason for that is that scans at their current level of sophistication, which may be their as best that they ever get, are always the result of averages across many samples. And and that you can't really find out about the details of things when you have to average across many samples, I think. So the kind of thing that I found, which I thought was interesting, was I found enough to be able to say that inner speaking on demand is lights up a different part of the brain than inner speaking when it naturally occurs. So we had in the sample, I think, had 5 or 6 people in it, 5 or 6 participants in it, and 1 or 2 of them, I forget now the details of it, but 1 or 2 of them had sort of naturally occurring inner speaking. And so we were putting these people into the scanner and letting them sit there in the scanner for a while, and then taking them out and interviewing them and putting them back in the scanner, so like 10 times into the scanner and back. So the big investment of scanner time and whatever. But there were and during some of those things in the scanner, we were telling them we want you to engage in inner speech. So when the light comes on, say elephant, or when the light comes on, say pencil, or whatever. The advantage of that is that you can time lock those samples easily enough. That's why people give cues when they're in the sample, when they're in the scanner. But the particular person that I have in mind also had sort of a lot of times where the random beeps occurred during inner speaking, real natural inner speaking, and what we found was that the brain, the portions of the brain that lit up on average while inner speaking naturally occurring, were different from the portions of the brain that lit up when you told somebody, say pencil or say elephant or whatever.
That's fascinating.
And I think that's a totally important finding, but it doesn't say much about inner experience. It says more about bad studies of inner experience. Most fMRI studies are on-demand studies, and what this study does is it calls that into question.
Wow, that's fascinating.
On to day 7.
Yes, sorry, I said bad. Gosh, a lot of chat there.
You can't complain that we didn't take it seriously.
No, not at all.
Words present.
I'm buying it.
Yep.
And then there's something about diffuse inner experience,
Yeah.
whatever that is.
Yeah, what's that mean?
Sorry?
What does that mean?
The way I understand it is the words are clearly present. What questions do I have? Or like the kind of semantics of them or the meaning is like diffuse and not clear. Like it's not like you have any clear questions or your mind is clearly set on any one thing. That's how I understand it.
So this is the portion of the description that we're writing in. And to my reaction to it now, which it seems to me was the same as it was then, but it probably isn't, but is that we were not able to sort out the natural attitude description from the experience. So there was something about the phrase. So it's possible that what Julian just said was right, which is sort of natural attitude from my point of view. And but it's also possible that from Mel's point of view doesn't really know what she's talking about here. How it could be that a phrase could be clear, but I'm not speaking it or whatever. I just don't know what to say about it. So I'm going to say it's veiled or foggy or something.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to disentangle that. We are working backwards, so we're getting to Mel as less and less experienced as a DES participant. Autopilot
Autopilot.
and words without semantic meaning.
I guess that
Combine-
almost seems like too much, even.
Sorry.
I
Yeah,
don't know, it seems like a shade above nothing.
I
So
agree.
words without no semantic meaning seems like the words are present, but they're maybe.
Like that feels more just like a fact of reality other than part of my experience to me. Like we know words are coming out of my thumbs and that's happening, but I don't think that the words are part of my experience.
Like that.
Yeah,
Or maybe no awareness at all.
maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, we
Yeah.
we called it autopilot, which we usually said for something that was somehow slightly experienced. We also put that between brackets, so it's kind of hard to tell. But
So maybe what we really should say is nothing.
Yeah. And then
maybe.
yeah, I'm okay with that.
Like that.
Or we even discussed this exact thing. That I understood it as a nothing, and then you said that was. You
There's
said your original. She is not experiencing anything. Seems categorically too severe. She is not a statue or dead or unconscious or asleep.
Thank you.
So like a shade above nothing. But, yeah.
So I softened the description. Thank you. She is not a statue.
So this is maybe an aside, but the reason that I want to make sure we write no semantic meaning in our green description is that there are a lot of people, probably most people, most psychologists, who think that when words are present, there is a semantic meaning that is present,
Mhm.
and that's experiential. And I just don't think that's true. And so this is an example of when Mel is meaningfully operating with words. She's typing not gibberish, but words that mean something to her at some level and to whoever it is that she's going to get. This is skillful word usage, but without any direct experience of it.
Yeah, okay.
Could be good to keep track of for that. Though.
Sorry?
Could be good to keep track of for those purposes.
Yeah.
And then the hearing the brother and the mom, but it's less the main thing.
Mm-hmm.
Chance that we confused context with experience, but
Mm.
seems like it was present.
Mm.
We buying that?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, here's the target that we were talking about earlier. Would carried along by the conversation be just as good as absorbed in the conversation?
I mean, based what's written there, that sounds like a fair thing to say, doesn't it? This feels like carried along by.
Receiving what my sister was saying. Sounds like carried along by.
I think it's a carried along.
We buying that?
Yeah.
Mhm. Sensory awareness, bodily.
Seems pretty straightforward.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. The same sensory awareness of pain, and then also the moisturizer. Although if it's more about the action of applying it,
Right.
that's sensory awareness or doing. I don't know.
Doing is a technical term for me, so I can't use doing here.
Yeah.
But, the action. Aware of the action?
Mhm.
That sounds reasonable for this.
It's funny, this is day 7 and it already feels like I'm not as good here as later. Like, how many days did we do? 14 or something?
Something like that.
Yeah, it feels like here is where I'm really starting to feel like, not casting doubt, but like just that I'm not as good at describing stuff here already in 7. And that's
So I had
7.
I had that reaction too a couple of samples ago, and this sample's here, and I filed away to myself to say that let's see whether that's really true, whether this is something about these particular day 7 samples, but
Mm.
Yeah, I wonder about the seeing in the mirror, because if you did experience that, if that was an experience, then that would make this multiple experience, I guess, because it's like 3 different things, which isn't so common for you, I think.
Yeah,
But that kind
I
of makes
feel
me
like,
wonder if you're really like taking and seeing yourself.
correct. I sort of have suspicions that the mirror and the moisturizer part are more facts of life here rather than things that were truly part of my experience.
Yeah. By
Like,
the,
I think the bodily pain thing is accurate, and then the others I cast a lot of doubt on.
by the mirror, I really wonder. Moisturizer, I mean, it's definitely plausible. I mean, DES isn't about what's plausible, but what's actual.
Yeah,
It's
it
really
just feels like,
plausible that you can be doing 2 things. But
it sort of feels like it would have actually been an autopilot-y sort of thing. But I've grabbed the detail of, oh, well, I was doing that, so I must have been experiencing that.
maybe.
But it's just interesting to note, like, this is still day 7. Like, that's a lot of sampling done. But we're feeling like it's not as sharp. That's a lot of hours already done, but it's not there. So it takes a long time, is what I'm saying.
right.
Hard. Also, I was mucking mucking some of it up.
I think it's true. It takes a long time.
Yeah, it's also interesting to see, yeah, times where Julian, it's like, oh yeah, we're all like, oh, our questioning wasn't as good there. Like, so it's on both sides where we're like, oh, we weren't as good back then.
Yeah.
Kind of satisfying.
The iterative method applies both to the interviewer and to the participant.
Mm.
The participant has to learn how to answer questions, and the interviewers have to learn how to ask them. And we're all always fighting the natural attitude or whatever.
Mm.
On to day 6.
Yep.
Mhm. Absorbing or carried along by the photo. I don't know.
Probably. So the question is, does it make sense to say this is carried along by a photo?
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't see why not.
Yeah, well, I think my only hesitation with it is that it doesn't carry you along per se, that it's like a static thing. I
Right.
think that's my only.
Taking in. So replace carried along by with taking in, because carried along by has an unfoldingness to it and taking in doesn't.
Yeah.
But it's the
But your experience can still be over time, even if a photo is just one thing. You could first be looking at one friend and then another friend and then the dog. So,
Yeah, except that's a different experience to what I'm describing.
yeah, you're just kind of absorbing.
Because when I say taking in here, I mean holistically in the same way that we've talked about when I'm holistically taking in what the director wanted watching a film and not getting hung up on particulars. And I'm
Mm.
certain that this was the same thing of
Yeah.
I'm taking in the photo on that holistic level.
Mhm.
So are you buying this, Mel?
Yep. Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Onward?
Yep.
Yeah. Carried along. Taking in. See, we even used taking in.
Yeah, carried along by conversation. Yeah, so at this point, all your chat is still really about whether
Mhm.
the levels of nothingness carried along by whatever it is are even like possible. Like that's the
Mhm.
chats we're having here, right?
Yeah. It was before my
Accepting
thinking
it.
changed. It seemed to me like I was wondering if sometimes you could be so absorbed, it just becomes kind of nothingness.
Mm,
You're just in it, but it circles around to being similar. Because the way you described it was so different to me. Like I hadn't
mm.
experienced that.
The difficulty of it is really what I've been wrestling with, how to convey that in some informative way, in some instructive way. It goes beyond us. So if I could write a book, how if I've been trying to figure out how to write a book or make a movie, or
Mm.
I think the best that I've been able to do about that is the videos that I've been making, and this process here that we're in is the best I've been able to do to try to somehow convey how difficult it is, because Julian and I had substantial battles about this stuff for a long time, and and it's hard to imagine how frequently that could take place. And I don't, it has to, you have to have somebody who is highly skilled, as I give myself credit for being, and but at the same time patient enough to deal with the with people who think they know more than you do and probably don't. And but that's that's the human condition in some very important way. And what do you do about that? How does that is the heart, I think, of whether DES can ever really be worth doing. Is it possible to convey that somehow? And what do you do about it?
If it's a method that can live beyond you and your particular way of doing it and be
Right.
transmitted, or if it just
Right, and which is part of the deal. I think it is possible that DES cannot possibly live beyond me. There's something fundamentally Hurlburtian about the method. I don't think that's true, but I don't know that I'm capable of untangling that. And I don't know what to do about that. That seems like sort of the fundamental thing to try to figure out. And I've been working at trying to figure it out for a long time. And but I don't know what to say about it. I don't know, other than the wrestling match is interesting.
Well, yeah, and so do you feel like the best that you have come up with thus far is exactly these different videos and journeys that you're putting up on the website now that show very transparently different experiences and whatever, and people working it out along the way and that sort of stuff?
That is absolutely the best that I've been able to do so far.
Yeah,
Whether it's good enough or not, that's another question. I don't know the answer to that.
yeah, but that's the best that you've come up with.
That is the best that I've been able to do. But I would say that at every step of doing it, there's got to be something better than this.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
But I've been putting, the commentary that we've been having and the argument, or if you want to call them that, discussions, debates, whatever, that Julian and I mostly have been having through this, I think are fundamentally important to the process.
Yeah. I agree.
And so I've obviously been putting my energy into it. Julian's been putting his energy into it. And Mel has been putting her energy. So it's the best. It's the best that I've been able to do. And the irony of it is, that I don't know whether it has any value at all, really. It may very well have personal value to me, or to Julian, or to Mel, and maybe not beyond that. In which case, well, maybe that was good enough.
You don't believe that, though, actually. You do believe that it has value beyond yourself.
If you're asking a St. Peter question, like if I were at the door and St. Peter says, this is you got to answer this question one way or the other, and that you give the correct answer is the key to the up or down here. I think that it has value other than beyond me or beyond us. But I would be eager to find out what St. Peter thinks about that. I mean, I would give that was the best answer that I can give you, but I don't have any reason to believe that I would end up with the harps rather than with the coals.
Yes. That was a very Russ response to that. You have such respect for the truth.
Yeah.
It's an interesting process.
Your words carry weight, and you respect the weight they carry.
Onward.
I have a question about your patience. If you, if you're a patient person, if you've been that way, does it come out of doing DES? Because, a lot of the questions, you're going to ask the chair thing if they're experiencing the chair. Like, I don't know if I would have the patience to deal with my shenanigans during the Mel interviewing. So, is that a learned thing?
So I don't think I can answer the question whether it's a learned thing because I've been doing it for so long. So it is part of me for as long as I can remember. Let's put it that way. I do think it comes. I don't see myself as patient. I see myself as trying to get it right.
I mean,
Whatever it
patient-
is, it's time. And that's a characterological deal, I guess. Probably for me for a long time. I'm interested in trying to get it right, and that requires patience. It seems to me, but it's not because I'm a patient person. It's because I'm interested in trying to do it the right way. And if you try to do it the right way, you end up having to be patient.
Mhm.
So it's more the result than the.
Yeah.
And I think the whole thing is so complicated that I'm not just saying, I don't know whether I'm on the right track or not. If St. Peter were to have asked, do you think that you've been on the right track for the whole time? I would have had to say, I don't know the answer to that question.
I may be a bit more optimistic than you, but
Yes, I think so too. I think we all are, but we've had this discussion with Russ before and I think this is part of you, or not being able to untangle yourself from the work at points and things like that. That you do this thing, Russ, where you like not diminish yourself, but you it's like it's a very Australian trait actually. You sort of like over humble yourself. Like, you go, oh, well, I'm not quite sure. Whereas everyone else is more sure than you that it's really meaningful. Like, it's a really interesting trait that you have about your work.
I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. But also, I think maybe that's, maybe actually when I have bodies of work in terms of documentaries I've made and stuff, I'm perhaps in like that, where maybe when it's just your own work, you're a bit more like, yeah, I'm pretty sure it's good or I'm pretty sure it's important, but yeah, I'm just trying my best. Whereas everyone else can watch it more objectively or whatever. And, maybe we often just are not our harshest critic, but there's something there.
Yeah, I don't think there's any evidence. I don't think there's any hard evidence that the method will outlive the method as I see it will outlive me. I don't think there's any evidence about that.
well,
And I don't, and what I guess I think is, I haven't gotten to the place where I've seen a bunch of people or enough people who I thought were really good at it.
mhm.
And that's quite likely my personal failing. But I don't. But but that's just the way it is.
Or just that it's really, really, excuse my language, but fucking hard.
Right.
So I think that's the challenge, and again, why we're all here of like, how is the best way, what's the best way to get everyone to have these discussions that we're having about all of these? Is there a better way? Is DES the best way? What's the best way to educate people about DES? If so, like, it's that bit of like, what is the best way to just get people to them reflecting on the stuff that this leads us to reflect on?
Right.
Yeah.
That's the challenge.
Correct.
Well, I finally started editing a video about DES today, so
Right.
Cool.
you can see if that leads to anything. I
Amazing.
started with Carrie, we haven't finished this analysis, and Carrie's a bit easier, I think, to introduce people to.
Yeah,
And yeah,
I agree.
but anyways, onwards.
Onwards.
This is autopilot.
Hmm.
I think in the Melanie time,
Yeah,
I think I might have called this just doing.
yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, they sound like the same thing from where I'm sitting.
I think there was a Melody sample about where she was buttering toast, if I'm not mistaken.
That
That's
also
what
just
she-
makes me think that I'm living and breathing the Nike slogan, just do it. I'm just doing it.
But I do remember some just doings, which is why I think it was surprised when you said you used it for like the doing of listening or whatever.
The doing of listening and just doing are two very different things for me.
Yeah. It's light taking it in.
So this is the conversation that we had earlier on, whether there were levels of absorption.
Yeah, well, this feels like carried along by.
So this is carried along by equals taking in equals absorbed at the low end of the continuum.
Yeah. Yeah,
This
wait, because
is
again, I think this is a good example of when you're. This is more to do about what else is not part of the experience, as opposed to being so engrossed in a particular experience, if that makes sense. You know what we were talking about before about when I'm locked in and am able to turn down the knobs on the ABs, you know, that, Russ?
Right.
This feels like that's the really relevant part of these samples of like, oh, that's interesting. I'm just carried along by this, but that's very different to when I'm really engrossed and really absorbed in a you know, slightly different.
So let me see whether I understand what this is about. Is this to the extent that I'm interested in anything, I'm interested in A, which is the seeing of the picture.
Yeah.
But there's other stuff that's going on, B, C, D, and E, which are probably there, but I'm not really paying attention to them at all. But I'm not ruling them out.
No,
But it,
I'm ruling them out, but it's not like it. So with the dial analogy, right? It's like, okay, yeah, me looking at Instagram. So dial A is the only thing that's turned up. Everything else is turned down. Is dial A turned up so high that I'm like super engrossed in it? No, but dial A is the only dial that's turned up.
okay.
Does that make sense? Your face suggests no.
The difference there is, I think you have described, I think it's you that have described some things where in this case here, if in the next room somebody had said, "Hey Mel," you would have heard that.
Mm.
Which means that B and C and D are not turned all the way down. You're still monitoring the environment. But you, I believe, have said, I think it's you, have said there are some times when if somebody had said, "Hey Mel," or even shaken me by the shoulders, I wouldn't have responded it. So B, C, and D can be turned down a long way or a little bit way.
Yeah, but yes, but more what I'm trying to say here is that I think there are two, you know, when we're talking about levels of absorption or whatever, like this is, yeah, I'm carried along by the thing, but that's almost the more interesting thing is comparing that to times where, no, the thing that I'm reporting is engrossing me and I'm locked into that level. Whereas on these samples, I'm carried along by the thing, and that's the only thing that's present, but it's not present in this engrossing way. Like, just in terms of, it's not describing the sample, I'm stepping back and just saying comparatively of looking at my experience. That's the interesting thing, I think, for these examples.
I'm buying it.
Mhm.
Onward.
Yep.
Mhm. The glutes. Bodily, bodily sensory awareness.
Again, there's so much more sensory awareness than I would have given myself credit for.
Yeah, there's more than I remembered.
There's autopilot, right?
It was even nothing. It's phrased pretty harshly. I
Yeah.
think this must have been something you described as particularly nothingy to be
Yeah.
phrased this harshly.
Yeah.
Onward.
Yeah.
Siat. A vibe.
Oh, yeah.
I'm fine with vibe as a code.
Yeah, like, what do you do there?
It's like a feeling that's but like less strong. Like you don't want to call it a feeling. Is that just a light feeling, or is it worth talking about vibes or states or whatever?
Some of the language that has come out to describe some of my stuff, Jesus.
Mhm.
So from my point of view, this sample is a dilemma between, is Mel actually experiencing a lightly positive, happy state? Or is she in a lightly positive, happy state and experiencing nothing?
Mm, I don't know.
Mhm.
And I don't think we were competent to make that distinction on day 4.
Yeah.
And I don't think we're competent to make that distinction now because we only had one. You only got one chance, basically.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, that's just a really challenging thing to try and. Oh, hello. A challenging thing to work out in general, because, like, the distinction is. Like, I understand the distinction, but I'm not sure if you could ever really work that out anyway. Like, that's hard.
So I agree with that. What I think can be worked out is how definitive you want to be about it.
Yeah.
I think we can get to a position where we could say, I was happy, but I wasn't particularly aimed at being happy. But I wasn't also aimed at not being happy, there's something positively happy, vibey, whatever, maybe, whether that's an experience or maybe not. I don't know. I think that is as good a description as you can get, which is a lot different from saying Mel was in a positive, happy vibe state. Because I think that, well, it's a natural attitude thing. I think
Mm.
it's too definitive without being clear enough in distinguishing between what's experienced and what is fact of the universe.
Yeah.
Onward.
Mm.
I think there's going to be more of it.
Mhm. Another nothing one. Nothing autopilot. No.
Because in these early beeps, yeah, I mean, it's 4, it's still not that early, but yeah, we're just trying to establish, wait, is this is the nothingness a real phenomenon that I experience? And then we've worked out how to perhaps all articulate and understand it better. But it's like here we're just even trying to work out if it's like, wait a
Mhm.
second, what's happening?
Well, that's why in my head nothing always involves or nearly nothing. I just don't think that's possible to. The philosophers use the example of money, and they can say, well, if you've got a penny, then you can't say you got no money. And I can say, yeah, you're right about that. You can't say you got no money, but in the real world, it doesn't matter. If all you got's a penny, you're in trouble. The real world distinction between nothing and only a penny is not.
Yeah, so this is, yeah, exactly what we now call carried along by.
Same thing. Wait, no, this is not a nothing one. This is an absorbed.
It's been a long day.
Nothing.
Is that what we're trying to say here?
Yeah.
Yep.
Mhm. Copy paste. But this was interesting that here you were talking, you still described it as being the same. This was the first time that came up, I think,
Yep.
and it surprised me.
And I agree, it is interesting.
It is interesting, and it comes. It's the interesting. It is, in its own way, it brings a focus on the natural attitude. I guess I would say.
Mhm.
Because the natural attitude says if I'm talking, I've got to know what I'm talking about. And that is not experientially true. I can be talking and saying intelligibly what it is that I mean to say, and that those words can be rolling out, and I don't have to know. I can greet them in the same way as I would greet the words that somebody else was speaking to me, even though they're coming out of my own mouth.
Which is fascinating. It does sound sort of impossible.
It only sounds impossible in the natural attitude.
Yeah.
When you recognize that the Mel is however many billions of neurons, I don't know the number, with however many trillions, I don't know that number either, of synapses. There's not one word processor in there. There's a very complex word processor, and she can be spitting out words in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, it's sort of crazy. Like it's mind blowing. So I understand, Julian, why you're like, wait, what?
It's crazy from the natural attitude.
Yeah.
See, we had to talk about it.
We had to talk about something.
Uh-huh.
All right.
So that was day 4. We might make it to the end here.
Wait, did we skip day 5?
Did we?
Did we do this tote bag sample? I don't remember doing that.
No, we've skipped day 5.
No, we didn't do it, so we probably skipped day 5.
Okay.
Just so many facts that don't need to be there.
Sorry?
It's just interesting seeing the like descriptions or like the way that I was doing DES back in here, because there's like so many facts of life that I am just like, these don't matter. Like all of them, that context. Okay, who cares? Like what it is here is just that I was carried along by a photo of my tote bag.
You like the tote bag?
Oh, my dog is having a freak out.
So the question would be, is admiring and carried along by the same thing?
Didn't we
Oh,
say
yeah,
take,
that's
didn't we
true.
say taking in for like the picture before, since it was static?
Shh, stop.
Hey, doggo, Coco.
So many dogs. Oh yeah, Coco, you've heard about this dog.
Yeah, famous. It's cute.
So I think we've agreed that carried along by and taking in are more or less the same thing when
Yeah.
applied to an unfolding situation or a static situation.
Yeah.
And the question is whether this admiring is something that is more than just taking in.
Yeah. I wonder if there's a.
Yeah, I would want to see the description a little bit more again to know how accurate admiring is. Like if there is enough to warrant it being something more than just carried along by.
Like, is it in the realms of feelings? Like, thinking that's nice, but that seems much too strong. Is it in the realm of sensory awareness? Like, but that seems too detailed. So,
But and also I'm conscious of whether admiring is just the vocabulary I've used to,
yeah.
you know, like I'm looking at the picture, but I've used the word admiring, but is there like admiring as part of the experience, or am I, you know, have I just used a word as opposed to I'm looking at the picture of the tote bag?
That's what makes life totally interesting.
Mm.
Yeah. Words don't have, almost no words probably have absolute meanings. And admiring is one of those words that's ambiguous.
Mm. Yeah,
My
right.
guess is that we weren't capable at this time to distinguish between those things.
I agree. I agree. I think that's the best we can do here.
Maddie Healy. Hmm. Yeah, it's those words, clearly those words, but you're not exactly speaking or hearing them. So do we call that words present?
This is more than words present because it's got the imagining of the conversation. But
Yeah.
Correct, because it wasn't words. It was like me sort of imagining running into him on the street. Yeah, exactly. I said that,
It's-
running into him on the street.
words present in my thinking about them is often I don't know the right word for it. Not uninflected or unimportant or just not I don't know what the word is. Not with very little attachment. The words, you have very little attachment to the words. The words are there for sure,
Hmm.
but here these are important words to you.
Yeah. It's clearly those words. But it's not in words. Yeah.
I've got two dogs that are really fighting at the moment. Yeah, the words carry important meaning here. Exactly right.
Right.
And the specific words, like it was that phrase, those exact words were important.
Can we have another sample where we decided it was a bit different from words present because
With
you're saying exactly this, like you're saying this concept, but there are no words. Like we even said it's not in words.
And
It's
that
like,
might be a carry sample.
I'm pretty sure it's some mouth. But
So what? Can you give me something to search for?
yeah, wait, give me more, Julian.
well, what if we search words present? Let's see. Maybe we didn't even call it that. But like I'm wondering, is it the words or is it you're saying that you know what that is that you're saying to him? If you would express it, it would only be in those words, but there aren't actually words present here.
Yes,
That
I
sounds
think-
to me like a carry sample,
Oh yeah.
but I'm not 100%.
yeah, but I understand the concept. I don't recall that, but
Well, I thought we talked about it last time. Maybe not.
So we called this one words present, and it didn't bother us at that time that this was a pretty oomph kind of a thing. So maybe we should just
Just
leave
stick
it at that.
with that. Sure, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I just think this one's interesting because it's just like, I mean, it's like really a very rare sample of like my imagination actually doing something for once. Do you know what I mean? Like, this is a real imagined scenario. So, like, there are words present in the sense that, yeah, they're part of the scenario that I'm imagining,
Mhm.
which is not something that's come up a lot, and that's why it's a bit confusing because it's like not as simple as like, yeah, words present as part of my, some example of an inner
Mhm.
monologue or anything like that. Like, this is just an entirely imagined scenario that happens to have words as part of it.
Yeah.
Like, so, yeah, if anything, this is just like imagination, really.
Yeah, and it is a full scene. You're talking to this guy. Even if you don't picture a scene, you don't visually see his face, you still have this scenario.
But but it was like I couldn't see it from a
Yeah.
imagined visual thing, but like I could give it, it was contextualized, it was
Yeah.
this thing was imagined on the street in New York, and this is what I said to him. So even though that's not like a detailed visual scenario like Kerry would give us, it's my
Yeah.
version of imagination.
Right.
Yeah, and it's no less of a scene.
So I just think that's where it's confusing. It's just a rare example for me, and so it's sort of hard.
So the fact that it's rare, I agree with that, but I think we ought to make sure that before we just assume that it actually is rare.
Yeah.
It does seem like Carrie, for example, has yurts and has conversations that she's remembering and whatever that is different from Mel.
Yes.
But whether, if we went back and looked at all the Mel samples, would we really find that Mel imagining a scenario is rare? I think the answer to that is yes, but
Mm.
You might want to compare it with some of the reading samples, and if you were imagining scenarios, I think there might be, but I'm not sure.
Mm.
But we shall see.
so, but what we would be talking, imagining a scenario that is not directly driven by the present circumstances. That's what we think is rare.
Yeah.
Well, not beyond it being a fact of the matter that I'm walking down the street in New York and I'm seeing them in concert in a couple of days. Like, there is some reason why it's happened,
Yeah, I agree with that.
but yes, it's not like directly linked to something right now. It's really interesting because we haven't, yeah, I don't think we've seen many examples of my ability to imagine.
Right.
So I'm not dead, Julian. I'm not a statue and I'm not dead. I can imagine.
Now I know.
In the modern world, there's a lot of scrolling.
Mhm.
Mm. I'd actually argue this is autopilot as well, yeah.
Kind of just doing.
God damn it.
Does seem less nothingy than some other samples if we're doing shades of nothing to something. I think it is probably a continuum. It could just be the way of describing, or that it's an earlier day, or whatever.
Well, also be careful of the fact, like, I've just given you a lot of context here. If you cut away a lot of that context, like I'm folding the laundry like that music even being on is sort of like more context rather than experienced, mostly.
Well, we thought it was part of experience, but just not
I agree it is,
prominent
but
or huge or totally absorbing.
But I think I'm agreeing with Mel that if this beep had occurred on day 12,
you wouldn't have got all that context from me.
I think we probably wouldn't have gotten it.
Yeah,
Maybe
I agree.
Mel would have been more able to say whether that was accurate or because we hammered at her or whatever,
Mm.
that the music was on, but I wasn't paying attention to it.
Yeah.
But we did get some nothingy samples on very early days, maybe even day one. So it's not like you're incapable of saying, oh, nothing, barely anything, autopilot, when that was
Right.
the case. But
I agree with that.
so either another nothing and we kind of screwed up, or there was a slightly happy vibe feeling state, whatever,
Yeah.
which could very well be.
I also wonder whether, I can't remember, but it'd be worth looking up whether there's music on when I've reported these vibes, happy vibes. Like there's music on here. Sort of wonder if that is a common link when I've reported a vibe. It's when I'm listening to music.
Could be. Should we at least keep track of listening in these notes so we can go back?
Yeah, because it just could be an interesting thing to note. Oh, every time I've reported like a vibe, it's when there's music on in the background. So it's just interesting.
Hearing.
In my world, listening to and hearing are quite different.
Yep.
Yeah.
Listening to involves a much more active focus, and hearing is a much more receptive.
Yep.
Did we? Oh, wait.
Same thing.
Mhm.
That's good enough.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So this was day 5, but we already did 4.
So we have what? 3 and 2 because you don't do 1, do
3
you?
and 2. Do we have the energy to do it?
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm okay, but I'm happy. How are you two?
Happy to go ahead.
I got an hour and a half before I have to be somewhere else. So I'm good.
All right, let's push through then. I still haven't seen that movie.
Really? Yeah, me neither, actually. I wanted to.
It's because it's so long I can never be bothered trying.
Yeah. I guess it seems like uncivilized thinking. It's clear thought. Should you see it? No words or feelings.
I agree.
Russ is typing something that we cannot see.
No, I'm not actually. I'm looking at this, trying to make sense of this.
Yeah. Yes, we talked about bandwidth, kind of what we were saying with the dials and find
Yeah,
out.
the A, B, C, D, and autopilot.
So A is
So
turned
the
up
question,
a little bit more here.
And I just think it's the when we were trying to work out like the layers of nothingness and stuff.
Yeah.
right? That's what I was trying to work through. How much of this is day 3, whatever.
Yeah, I think that's all it is really.
Nada.
This is autopilot from where I'm sitting.
So to come back to one of our previous conversations, what Mel has a lot of is things like that where she's not spurred to think about what she's going to do with her New York residency. She's not thinking about the travel to New York or where she'd live in New York, or the kinds of things that could be spurred by this,
Mhm.
which a lot of other people, including Carrie, would do, I think. And
Mhm. So it may have been an even more nothingy nothingness. But Mel ultimately wasn't sure.
so I think that's in accord with what we've been saying along today, that there are continuums along these things. It's not
Mhm.
like Mel can either be in the nothing mode or in the autopilot mode or in the vibe mode or whatever. All these things
Yeah.
are sort of
Mhm.
slushy, not very solid stuff.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, again, I'd say the same thing.
So what are we going to say about this? Nothing.
Yeah, I think this is nothing autopilot again, isn't
So
Mhm.
we tried to make a distinction here.
Well, Russ, is it premature to talk about this? But sometimes I think I've seen when you do the coding with the spreadsheet, you have like numbers for nothingness, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you put stuff somewhere along the continuum. Is that, or is it too early to talk about that process?
So I think we could do that. I can't remember ever doing it actually. I might very well have done it, but I don't actually remember doing it. If I thought, what I would say is, if I thought it was possibly productive
it?
to see whether we could distinguish between shades of nothingness, then I would have no objection to having us rate them on a scale of 1 to 5 or whatever. Personally, I don't think it's productive, and I think that
Mhm.
exercise would be more frustration than it's worth.
Mm.
But it's a democratic operation in a way, and
No,
This
I,
is,
I I tend to agree. I think it'd be more frustration than it's worth.
yeah.
I just think it's not possible that the, we could rate 1 to 5, but there is absolutely no reason to believe that Mel's 4 is going to be the same as my 4 is going to be the same as Julian's 4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I dressing it up with numbers, it's still a big. So this is slightly more than nothing.
Mm.
Mm.
Autopilot.
Didn't really mean to shout here. So that's day 3.
Mhm.
So it does, this is relevant to the previous conversation we had. This was a very complicated set of interactions that we had going on here. And, in the sense that this is the first time that Julian and I sampled together, I think. Is that right, Julian?
Mhm. Yeah.
Mel was the guinea pig of that.
Mhm.
So there was a lot of shit going on here, trying to figure out who was doing what people meant, that how to mean it, and how to say it, and how not to say it, and whatever. There was a lot of stuff going on.
100%.
Mm.
Yeah, you got a particularly challenging case to kick you off, Julian. My
So
shades
did,
of nothingness.
yeah. So did Russ. Am I the only person you've done DES with who hasn't learned it from you directly? I mean, I read your books and stuff. But
I we've had we had one graduate student. I don't remember whether we actually ever wrote this up, but we had a graduate student who came into the lab, and we gave her some instructions, some things to read, and then had her do what she thought was DES interviews on the way in. So
Mhm.
before she had any personal interactions with us.
Mhm.
I don't remember actually whether we ever made of that,
Mhm.
but no, you were more invested in it than anybody else, I guess, for sure. More invested in the study of inner experience. Mel doesn't know all of that story probably, but Julian had sent me stuff that he had done, and I'd been critical of it, and thought he would go away, but he didn't.
And we're still here.
Withstand the criticism.
Yeah. So there was a fair amount of history before, and then did you sample, Julian?
I
Did you
did.
become a subject?
Oh no. I'm potentially curious, but I don't know. I feel like maybe you could learn more by looking at other people instead of inward. But, yeah.
What are sorry, this is a sidebar, but your students, Russ, like, what are the courses that they take that are DES related?
There aren't any.
Well, but how do they learn this?
From the kind of things that we're doing right here. Julian is what we're doing with Julian is what we would do with my students. When I have a lab, then there would be more group interviews and more conversation back and forth. This is what I thought. This is what I thought. But it's all trial and error.
But as in that they get the opportunity to do that as part of their psychology bachelor studies at University of Nevada. Like, what's the?
So it's a very complicated thing, and so they're in a PhD program. I think probably all of my students are in a PhD program in clinical psychology, and they get standard training in clinical psychology, but not from me. And then their dissertation work, or their master's thesis work, or their research work is with me. And I am very critical of the work of what they're learning in the clinical psychology world.
Yeah.
And so that is something of a difficult thing for them. And you know, I'm the lone ranger in the department, so I don't have a. I used to have another faculty member, but he went on to become the provost of the university, and so he doesn't do this kind of work with me anymore. But we used to have a joint operation. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, interesting.
But I have not taught courses on descriptive experience sampling. I teach statistics. And, there's some irony there, but
Correct.
I don't know whether I've told you that story. But when I started this work back in the day in 50 years ago, anybody who was interested in something like consciousness was well out in the fringe of psychology, and thought to be a soft-minded person. And I, having been trained as an engineer, the university here, the department here, wanted me to teach graduate level statistics, which I said, okay, I'll do that. And I hated it because none of my students knew anything coming in that I thought was valuable. And it wasn't just that they were coming from UNLV; they were coming from around the country, and they had not mastered sophomore level statistics, and I was supposed to be trying to teach them graduate level statistics, and that was a dilemma, which I thought was my fault. But I eventually decided it wasn't, and so I said to the department, basically, let me not teach this anymore. Let me teach undergraduate statistics for a while and see whether there's possible to teach something in a way that people can remember it a year later. And out of that, I developed what I thought was a better way of teaching, learning statistics, and I eventually wrote a book about it, which is now a textbook in its 6th edition. And so when I went to sell the book to the publisher in the first place, I told the editor, my primary interest, I think this is a good way to teach it, but my primary interest is because I want to be thought of as not soft-minded by the psychology world. So if I'm a published statistics textbook author, then they can't say, well, he's afraid of statistics or whatever. And she said, I never had somebody try to sell me a book by telling them it wasn't their primary interest.
True.
But she signed it. But at any rate, I teach statistics and use that as a way of paying the bills, basically, or being a productive member of the department.
So fascinating.
But it's crazy that, I don't know, they don't give you a seminar on DES and consciousness.
I could. I could.
Yeah.
But I never have. And sometimes I criticize myself for that. I don't want to teach a course in consciousness science because I've never considered myself a consciousness scientist. I still don't consider myself a consciousness scientist.
Why?
The world of consciousness science, I think, is far too theoretical. Consciousness scientists think they can do without DES, and I don't think that's possible. I don't see how it is possible to be a consciousness scientist without at least trying to describe what people's consciousness directly experienced stuff is. But consciousness doesn't think that's important.
Not even just not DES, just no method.
Right.
Like most of them just are like, well, I always think in words.
Exactly. So to teach a course in consciousness science, I would have to teach a lot of stuff that I think is just flat bullshit.
Right.
And that's hard for me, and so it's easier for me to teach statistics. But arguably, I should have taken that on more aggressively across my career, taught more, forced myself to teach why I thought consciousness science was on the wrong track or whatever. But I didn't.
Yeah, it's just so fascinating that there's no way to be able to teach what we've been doing as some sort of seminar exactly.
I shouldn't say I never did it. I actually did it once or a couple times actually. And I had students sample and then talk amongst themselves, and well, not amongst ourselves, but it was basically this kind of stuff with a few more people around them and at the undergraduate level.
At undergraduate level, interesting.
Yeah.
And was it worthwhile?
I didn't do it again, so I guess I didn't think it was. I guess I didn't think it was of total value.
They taught some DES where I went to university. Well, I did an exchange semester in Ljubljana, Slovenia, and they taught DES, but they were they were all kind of practitioners of this other method, microphenomenology, which there was kind of a big debate, between the two camps. But it wasn't actually DES the way they taught it. But we did sample each other and do the beeps and talk about that.
What the best way to have proceeded? I don't know the answer to that. I have done what I have done.
But you landed in a Booker Prize winning novel.
Not everybody can say that. That's right.
That's true.
Yeah.
I don't think that novel actually won the Booker Prize. I think
Oh, really?
one of her previous novels won the Booker Prize,
Oh, okay.
but I don't think this one.
Close enough.
People were probably scared off by that opening part. You read the reviews; they say I like the whole book except the.
She lost me in the first 4 pages. Something about nothingness or something. Wait, what was that other word that you said before, Julian? Microphenomenology?
Microphenomenology.
What's that?
It's another method by looking at consciousness, but it's not as rigorous. There are no beeps, and you can ask about someone's experience of like 10 years ago. Like it could be like, oh, when you solved that math problem 10 years ago, what was going on in your mind? And then people make up stuff.
How on earth could I remember that? I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, in their defense, they got some method behind it. But what I would say is when Julian asks questions, which would say, well, if I knew about the movie, would I know more about your experience? That's the issue that drives microphenomenology. So their goal is to try to figure out what there is that goes beyond Mel's direct experience that might contribute to her direct experience. And they think they can make it do it. And the answer to your question about how they can do it, Mel, is they have them relive it. So the event happened 10 years ago, but now we want you to bring that back into mind, and experience it again, and then we'll bring it back to mind and experience it again, and bring it back in mind and experience it again. I have argued that there's no experiencing again involved, and but that doesn't mean that there isn't something important that they could learn in that regard. I have never said I don't think that there is nothing of value in microphenomenology, but I don't think they do what they say they do. It might be valuable.
Mm.
But it is that kind of thing is a dilemma to me. Would it be better for me to criticize people, which I have done with microphenomenology, or would it be better for me just to go straight ahead and try to do DES as best I can do it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I have chosen the latter, but I don't know that was the best way to do it.
I suppose I can bring this up now. I wanted to ask you, Russ, at the end, but maybe interesting to you too, Mel. But I'm doing some more DS sampling these days with a friend I studied with in Slovenia or in my studies. and she did microfen, but she's been interested in both methods. She's very open-minded. And she reached out to me and wanted to do DES sampling. She might use it in her research. But yeah, it was pretty impromptu, but we worked out the beeper thing with her phone, and we did one day, and we're planning to do it again. But yeah, I'm wondering, is it a good idea for me to do it solo, or do you always do it with a co-investigator, Russ, and then, yeah, maybe even if you or one of your students or Mel or someone is interested in it, co-investigate?
So I think co-investigation is usually a good idea. I don't always do co-investigation. I would say 90% of the time I probably do, but most of the time I'm doing it with a student, and part of the value is training of the student.
Mm-hmm.
But also part of the value is keeping me honest. So it's,
Yeah. So it's
you know,
possible.
we can have conversations where I say this is what I think, and the best outcome of that is for somebody else to say, no, I don't think that's right, and then we can have a conversation like
Mhm.
like we have had here.
Yeah. Like I say, it is very difficult with her because she's done a lot of microfen stuff, and it very, like what you were saying about microfen, looks for the very slight or on the edge or things, we call it pre-reflective things. So everything that in DES we might say, well, we don't really know if that's there or not, so, you know, let's leave that for now. But yeah, it's a challenge. It's very, very difficult for me.
That would be a challenging situation.
Interesting.
Also, she's resistant to using the in-ear beeper, and I've said some reasons why it's important, why you think it's important, but she thinks it's distracting her from, too distracting. So in our next session, I said, well, maybe let's do half with it in the ear and half without, and then we can see and compare. So that's how I'm going about it. But yeah, how would you approach that if someone just really doesn't want to do the thing in the ear? It says, why can't I just set an alarm and have it play through my phone?
Well, how I would handle this is different, but what I would notice is that almost everybody thinks they don't have to do it right.
Mm-hmm.
They want people think that they can get away with something else and it doesn't really matter. And how the fuck would they know? But even when I talk about DES to people around the world or whatever, most people say, well, this would be a faster way to do it, a more streamlined way to do it, and hardly anybody says, well, how can we do it even better than that? And that I don't understand that. Maybe if DES were a totally established method and we decided this was as good as it can be done, then it would be time to come along and say, well, we can dismantle this and say, well, we can take away this piece of it and we can take away that piece of it and we can still end up with something good. But you can't. That isn't the mindset. The mindset is, I just want to do something easier first, and that'll be good enough. I just don't think it's true. So shall we press on here and get the?
Let's
Yes,
go on, yeah.
last day.
Seems a bit different than autopilot. There's some kind of like beginnings of a thought process. It was more than we were able to articulate in some other examples. But then again, it's a very early day, so it's hard to tell.
So that's the dilemma.
But
And I would say, in this, you might find this valuable, Julian, that if the choice is between saying that we know what's going on here and saying that we don't know what's going on here,
Hmm.
almost always it's better to say I don't know what's going on here. I think that's might be generally true. Because if we say there's nothing, we don't really know what's going on here, and then we sample again, we can have the possibility of discovering what's there.
Hmm.
But if we say at the outset, I know what's going on here, and this is what it is, I think that pollutes the upcoming discussion.
Hmm.
And so in my recollection of this sample is that I would be saying I don't know what Mel's trying to say here.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like some sort of nothingness, and that's about all we've got.
Right. And I would say, living in the don't know, people don't do that very well. People in general have a hard time with it.
Hmm. Remember, this discussion was just a basic misunderstanding of words that we had to really clarify. More than nothing, but not much more.
I mean, we all definitely get better at understanding as this goes on, don't we?
I think so, yeah.
Dormant.
This one does seem like a nothing.
Mm.
I remember this one, you saying it was dormant, then comparing to the beeps before, that it was definitely less experience, no experience.
Mm.
So my reaction to that is I didn't believe any of this shit. So we're trying to figure out what we're talking about here.
Mm.
Mm.
I agree. It feels like because trying to find the right questions to ask from my experience, trying to find the right language for me or whatever, day 2 feels as unhelpful as day 1 here.
Mm.
Well, this is definitely just carried along by conversation or whatever we've been describing that as.
Which we called it nothing.
Yeah.
I wonder if it was really nothing, or if that was just your way of describing it. It was like, oh, nothing, just talking to my sister. But no, but
What I think we ended up meaning by nothing in this kind of a situation is that there was nothing beyond being
Yes.
carried along by the conversation.
I agree with that.
It doesn't mean that there's nothing being experienced because she's experiencing the conversation. She knows what her sister's saying, understands it and all. And that was the discussion that Julian and I had at length over many sessions about something about content. It wasn't like content free.
Yeah.
This was whatever Mel's sister was talking about. That was the content, but there was nothing specified beyond that.
This is phrased very different from those other ones. So it
What,
could
the
be that it's
description?
actually different, or that just we hadn't worked out.
No, we just hadn't
That's
worked
all.
out. From where I'm sitting, that's exactly the same as the ones that happened later. We just hadn't
Okay.
worked that out yet.
Yeah.
That's what I think. So, the next, if we're going to follow this procedure to the end, the next thing is that we, each of us, independently, within a day, write a description of Mel's experience.
All right.
I have a technical name for this, which I'm not exactly sure what it's called, but it's something like the independent casual characterization or independent informal characterization or something like that. Where the object is for each of us to commit ourselves to what we think is the important characteristics of Mel's experience. And I will send you this document that's on the screen as it is now so that you can all refer to that. It's not like you have to do this from memory. But the object is to commit ourselves to what we think is important. So our goal, the ultimate goal, is to describe Mel's experience as revealed by 40 some beeps or whatever. And the question is, well, how are we going to do that? What are the dimensions, the characteristics that we want to use? And so Mel gets to say what she thinks, and Julian gets to say what he thinks, and Russ gets to say what he thinks about that. And then we'll bring those together and see whether we agree. And if we do, then we'll make a spreadsheet, and then we'll go back and rate each one of those beeps and make sure we're understanding the same terminology.
Mm-hmm.
So do we want to play that game?
Sounds
Absolutely.
good to me.
So my task is to send this document to you, and your task is within a day to send back a idiographic description of Mel's experience. And there's no fair peeking at somebody else's experience until you've written down your own. Once you've written your own, then you can look at it. We can send, when you're done writing it, send it to everybody. But no fair looking at anybody else's until you've done your own.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good.
Yep.
Anything else we should be talking about today?
I don't think so.
Can't think of anything. Should we stop
So we're
recording?
going to want to have a meeting to go through.
Oh, that's true.
Maybe we should put that on the calendar.
put some time in the
We can
calendar.
always cancel it if we can't. So a week out from now, something like that.